Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. Last week, the federal government presented its long-awaited budget, nearly 2 years in the making due to the COVID lockdown and emergency measures in place, which is understandable. However, Canadians want to know just exactly where our country is headed post-COVID. The budget certainly provided us some clues as to what to expect in the near future. But firstly, I want to offer my congratulations to Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, for being the first woman in Canadian history to present a budget. And what about that budget? In my observation, the budget was indeed very large, yet there wasn't really anything new, with the exception of universal daycare. But even then, that will take a long time to implement. To me, it seems very obvious that this is a pre-election minority government budget. So exactly what did the budget contain? What does it mean for the average Canadian and Canadian family? And for how long will Canada be running a deficit? And of course, just how are we going to pay for it all? Well, joining me now to analyze this new budget is Aaron Wudrick, Federal Director at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and Elliot Hughes, Senior Advisor at Summa Strategies. Elliot, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today to help me unpack this whole budget. Let's delve right in. I think, again, top of mind, as it always seems, is COVID. And we're looking at the budget and seeing what's in there in terms of COVID relief. The CRB, formerly the CERB, is now being extended to September. What stood out for me was that starting in July, the government said they're going to start clawing back the CRB from $1,000 to $300 every 2 weeks, because the government expects the economy to be fully opened by July. And I thought this was a huge indicator of perhaps what's in store in the near future. Elliot, I'll start with you. Are we opening in July? This is news to me?
I sure hope so. News to me too. The way things are going with the rollout, that seems a little bit optimistic. But let's hope that between the provinces and the federal government, we can get more vaccines in the country, and then those vaccines into people's arms to get the economy rolling again. I think the government had to include some measures in last week's budget, for COVID, to sort of get the job done, so to speak, as much as they would much rather be focused on the economic recovery. But certainly, July sounds great right about now, and hopefully we can all get there.
Yes, and Aaron, they mentioned once vaccines hit 80%, and again they threw out this July date. I started getting excited for a moment. I said, "Oh, we could have our summer. Who knows what will be happening?" The clawback for CRB, is this what you'd like to see at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation? That we sort of kind of phase out of the CRB?
Yeah, look, our position all along has been that, of course, in an emergency, there's going to be these temporary measures in place. I think everybody understands that. It's a sort of once in a century event. And, you just spend the money so that people can pay their rent and buy groceries. All we'd ask for is that the government continue to adjust and recalibrate these programs as the situation evolves. It sounds like they have made the judgment that by the summertime, they're going to be in a position to unwind a lot of that spending. And that's good news in terms of fiscal discipline, because, just simply putting an end to these temporary programs, if we come out on the other end of the pandemic, that's going to go a long way into shaving down the size of the deficit.
Okay. And one of these interesting points, and there's a smaller one in terms of line item, but it was interesting to me, was the old age security. So the government said that they're investing $12 billion over 5 years to increase OAS. So they're going to give an extra $500 this summer to those, I believe, 75 plus, and then they will be getting recipients will be getting an extra 10% going forward. So I didn't anticipate this. I guess, do seniors need, or seniors retirees, they needed that extra little bit of money, Elliot?
I think this is part of the government's strategy to help support, some groups that might need that support. Certainly, there are some, elderly Canadians who may not need that support, but there are some who do. Similarly, the support that the government provided to students and to businesses to help rehire students and to make it easier to hire students. There's also a lot of money set aside, I believe $300 million for separate funds for racialized Canadians and other groups as well who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. I think what that does, and you highlighted it in your opening, those also align quite well with some voting blocks that I think are very important to the government in when the next potential election is. So not only do they, I think, fundamentally believe that it's the right thing to do, but I also think that they fundamentally believe that it's also the way to get those groups that support an election the support that they need too.
Okay. Well, after we come back from this commercial break, I want to discuss the new program that is going to be funded, Universal Childcare. So stick around. We'll be right back in a few moments. Welcome back. It was federal budget last week, and joining me now to unpack it all is Aaron Wudrick from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and Elliot Hughes from Summa Strategies. So as I mentioned, the one major line item, if you will, or new program that will be funded, and was a huge cost, is universal daycare. Now, this is something that we've heard teased from this government for several years. And now it seems like it's actually going to happen. So $30 billion over 5 years is what the government's committing, with recurring about $8 billion a year just to maintain the program. And the objective is to cut fees by 50%. So that we get an average of $10 per child per day for daycare. So Aaron, maybe I'll start with you. Does Canada actually need a universal child daycare or universal daycare program?
Well, I don't think there's any debate that parents can use help with children. They're expensive. I've got 3 kids myself. And, back of the envelope, I think putting them through daycare probably sent me back close to $100,000. So there's obviously a huge cost involved. And I think it's fair ball from a policy standpoint for federal and provincial governments to look at ways that they can help parents with the cost of kids. As to whether or not we need a national government program that's focused on daycare, that's a separate question. And I think that's where we get into an interesting debate. I don't think many people would begrudge governments helping parents, but whether or not the federal government basically walking into what is essentially a provincial jurisdiction and putting strings on money to provide certain types of childcare that may not provide the flexibility everybody needs, I think that there's some questions that should need to be asked there.
Okay, what do you mean when you say certain types of childcare, that there are strings attached?
Well, when it comes to child support, we can go back to the debate at the 2006 election, right? The Liberals at that time proposed a national daycare strategy, and the Harper Conservatives proposed checks to parents. Of course, Harper won that election. He implemented the checks. And then when the Liberals came back into power, they didn't scrap the checks. They improved the program. They put more money into it, and they means tested it. So they directed the money to the people who needed it most. So it was essentially a win for both parties. I thought that was an interesting sort of rare point of agreement in a very partisan time. But now it seems like the Liberals, in spite of the fact they've put a lot of resources into a program that's $27 billion a year in this child benefit, they're now saying we need to go even further, and they want to spend, like you said, another $8 billion a year on national daycare. Okay,
so Elliot, what stood out for you? Because I know the Minister of Finance and even the Prime Minister repeatedly referenced the Quebec model. So Quebec has had universal daycare since the 90s. And I think what's important is recognize that at the time, one of the impetus to universal childcare is basically suggesting that we need more people participating in the workforce. Primarily, that's women who are engaging in childcare. Therefore, if we have universal daycare, that impediment to women's engagement in the workforce will be removed. So in the 90s, Quebec female participation was about 74%. And with the universal program, it grew to 87%. But right now, in Canada, the participation rate of women in the workforce in the rest of Canada, on average, is 84%. That's already quite high. So how much higher can we expect women's participation in the workforce with this sort of program? Basically, what I'm asking is, will this actually change anything, or are we just giving away money?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in this issue. I think the government views there to be a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world. And I think what COVID has done was it showed the government, it showed people impacted by that women disproportionately are impacted by the pandemic. And I think there was a lot of thinking in liberal circles, particularly around the need for a national early learning and childcare program. And I think the pandemic has just firmed that up. So I think that's the view that they've taken. You make a fair point in terms of the participation rates of the economy for women. I think that the goal for the Liberals is to try and nudge that as high as they can. Why try and stop at 84 or 87% in Quebec? Let's see if we can kind of continue to improve on that. But you're right. This is an expensive program. There's going to be some challenges with implementing it. But I understand that this is, something that the Minister of Finance has really just staked her reputation on. And I think for her to be able to, go down credibly as a big finance minister, so to speak, that it's going to be really crucial and really key for her to get this deal done individually with provinces and get that set up in the years to come.
And obviously, when we think of Quebec, so they already have their program in place. This is basically just cash in hand saying, here, we're going to subsidize it for you now going forward. Obviously, I assume it's going to take several months, if not at least a full year, to get something in place, maybe longer, for the rest of the provinces like Ontario, BC, et cetera. My question, and perhaps we'll answer this after the break, is for me, it always comes down to parental choice. Why create a big government program? Why not just give me the check and let me decide how I want my children and their childcare taken care of? Be it, maybe it's a credit towards a grandparent who's taking care of a child, or maybe I want to stay home for a year or two, or maybe my husband wants to do the same. We're going to talk about that right when we return. Welcome back. Once again, we're picking up our discussion on last week's federal budget. And again, one of the biggest items that was unveiled, or the biggest item that was unveiled, was the universal daycare, the long-awaited program now executed by the Liberals. So before the commercial break, I mentioned that I like choice. I like, if the government wants to help me out, great, but give me the choice and give me the tools to make the decisions best for my family. And with universal daycare, one complaint we hear from many families is, well, it's a one-size-fits-all kind of system. And again, we don't know how this is going to be implemented. We see what happens in Quebec, and that's one model. Will there be flexibility in models? I'm not sure, but maybe Aaron, you can speak to this aspect. Where's the choice for parents in terms of childcare with this kind of program?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the challenge. I mean, when it's framed as an economic imperative that the objective is to nudge women into the workforce, that's essentially the government stating a preference. And, so we can have a debate about whether it should be government policy to try and get women into the workforce, or whether the policy should be governments empowering women to make whatever choice they want to make. I think there's valid points on both of those views. The only other thing I'd say on the childcare plan is that there are additional costs involved. This is not a fully bankrolled by Ottawa program, so that's where the provincial position comes in. And let's not forget, as much red ink as Ottawa is spilling, the provinces, many of them are in much worse shape. So it's going to be a challenge for a lot of them to come up with the money to match funds that Ottawa is providing in order to provide this program.
Okay, we're going to switch off topics here. Now, another concern I had is that there was perhaps too much stimulus in this budget. Since the economic update last fall, we have seen that the economy has grown back faster than expected, and that's a good thing. We are 400,000 jobs away, I believe, from the pre-COVID employment rate where we were pre-COVID. And, perhaps it's rather inconvenient. We're doing a budget that, for the Liberals, perhaps, I don't know, that the economy has become too strong. Minister Freeland said they're going to hold back, and they're going to add more stimulus if necessary. So, Elliot, is there too much stimulus here? Do we need it?
I don't think there is. Minister Freeland is informed by the U.S. response in the 2008-09 crisis and the Obama administration's underwhelming response there, and a staggering economy coming out of that. Janet Yellen, who's now Secretary of the Treasury in the U.S., and Minister Freeland are, I'm sure, in close contact on a number of issues. One of them around the way out of this. So I think now is the time for that spending. President Biden is going to be committing to $6 trillion worth of spending in his first 200 days. So I think he buys into that theory as well. Bit of a different conversation there. They're also talking about sort of the revenue side, which we're not having here. But certainly from my perspective, now is the time to take advantage and to make those investments. And while the economy is going to be good, and that's what Bay Street seems to be saying, this has been a pretty rocky road with a lot of ups and downs with COVID. So we don't know where this is going to go. We think the next couple quarters look good and the following years look good, but we don't know. And so those investments by the government are important and are hopefully in the places that are going to help create those jobs and that economic growth in the years to come. Okay,
well, we have seen reports that suggest that because of COVID and the lockdown, Canadians have had less opportunity to spend, if you will. So the savings have gone up quite a bit. On average, $10,000 per Canadian family has been now saved, or they haven't spent that money, so it's now sitting in their savings. So once the economy opens, people probably will go out on a spending spree, and there could be a lot of stimulus roaring to go. So, and interestingly, I read a stat that said the number of bankruptcies and insolvencies has actually been going down, which is quite interesting in COVID. So, Aaron, again, I'm going to put this question to you. Do we actually need the stimulus when perhaps naturally, once we reopen the economy and once people get out of lockdown, the stimulus might just come on its own with the amount that Canadians have saved?
Well, yeah, usually the traditional justification for stimulus is that the economy is slow, and so the government spending is a necessary jolt to get the economy moving again. What's unique about this situation is because it's an artificially induced, recession downturn because of the pandemic, but because the government provided so much in terms of support. In fact, by some measures, it's estimated the government sent about $7 out the door for every dollar in lost income. And that's the reason that you see so many Canadians have increased savings rates. So uniquely this time around, there's a lot of stimulus that's been preloaded. And I think those are some of the minister's words from late last year. It's sitting in people's bank accounts. And as you say, I think one of the best ways to unlock that is to give people confidence that they can reopen, that they can travel, that they can spend. And so I think unusually in this case, there's a strong argument that a lot of that stimulus is already sitting in Canadians' bank accounts. And so the imperative of government to spend even more is greatly reduced.
Well, one thing, if I could jump in on that.
Actually, you know what, Elliot, I'm going to hold you there because we've got to cut to commercial in just a few seconds, but I'll give it back to you right when we return from this commercial break. Please stick around. Okay, we're wrapping up our discussion on the federal budget unveiled last week by the first ever female Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. Before we went to break, I was going to give you that opportunity to add your comments there on the stimulus spending, et cetera. Elliot, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. All I was going to say was, while I do think that the stimulus is appropriate now, even with some preloaded stimulus, to Aaron's point, I was a bit dismayed not to see a clear, articulation of an economic vision or goal for the government and for Canada, frankly. They keep talking about building back better, and this is a time to pivot. And I think we missed an opportunity to articulate what that vision is and to at least speak a little bit about what the strategy is going to be to get there. I think that's partially because we find ourselves still in the midst of this COVID pandemic and the third wave, and maybe it's hard to begin thinking about that fully as you're grappling with some of the challenges that the pandemic is putting in front of the government. But I did wish that in somewhere in those 740 odd pages that they would have talked a little bit more about that.
Well, I think we're going to be hearing a lot of that discussion in the coming months, because I think by the summer we're going to be in election mode. And I think, this is what we're hearing on the ground, or, rumors are that the writ will be dropped in the next few months. And perhaps then Prime Minister Trudeau will have that opportunity to articulate his vision and didn't let the cat out of the bag with this budget, so to speak. But let's talk about the deficit and debt. The debt was $600 billion when Harper left in 2015. Now it's expected to be $1.4 trillion by 2026. Deficit goes from balanced budget 2015, and again, these are very different times, but 2015 to $30 billion by 2026. Debt to GDP, 30% in 2019, 51% to 2026. Although there is an expectation will be lower to 49%. Yet still, interest payments on our debt are the lowest it's ever been in history, thanks to interest rates being so low. So, Aaron, I've just provided some staggering figures. They, as a laywoman, these are surprising to me, and I'm trying to get my head around, well, how will we ever pay for this all? So, take your best shot at this. Are we too in debt? Have we just crossed a line and we can't return now?
Well, look, some people argue that we never need to pay it back because we just keep rolling it over. And I would say this, there's no question that during the pandemic, some of that spending was necessary. There was no getting around that. So I think you have to disentangle the decision to, rack up debt in the good times versus during an emergency. I think those are two separate debates.
Right.
I think there's a lot riding right now on low interest rates. There's a lot of faith being banked on the fact that interest rates will stay low. If they do stay low, maybe everything will be fine. If they don't stay low, we could find ourselves in trouble pretty quickly. And just to give people an idea of the context, as much as the daycare plan is being held up as the centerpiece, the major spending item, they're going to spend 5 times as much on interest payments as the daycare plan over the next 5 years. So, by 2026, when they're going to spend $8 billion a year on the daycare plan, they're going to spend $39 billion on debt interest, and that's if they stay low. So it is a considerable cost. I know people debate how much it constrains government generally, but you can't get around the fact there is a lot riding on the hope and belief that interest rates are going to stay low for a very long time.
No, it is a good point. But again, as our GDP keeps growing, you look at the percentages, and as long as our debt to GDP stays relatively low, then I guess we're in good shape. But any thoughts, Elliot, in the minute we have left? Do you think interest rates will rise, and do you think Canada will be in trouble with running such a large deficit?
Well, I won't make any predictions on interest rates here, but I do agree it is a challenge, and it is certainly something that the government needs to come up with a plan for. I think there needs to be a fulsome discussion and debate around how it's going to raise revenues. Well, I think they've already laid out their plan on how they think they can grow the economy. I think there needs to be some talk when we get on the back of COVID-19 pandemic on how we're going to constrain things a little bit more in terms of our spending. So certainly that discussion needs to happen, because we can't keep going at the current rate. And I don't think anyone thinks that we can, but a discussion needs to be had in a fulsome way about what the plan is going forward.
Well, again, I think that discussion will be had probably at leaders' debates in a few short months, when it looks like we might be headed to election. So we'll have to wait and see. But thank you both very much for your insights today on the federal budget. Thank you very much. Well, definitely was an interesting budget. Not so much meat, but definitely a lot of deficit and debt in that budget. Universal daycare, of course, was the biggest takeaway. This long-awaited plan that the Liberals had been teasing about for years, perhaps even decades, has now been put to the front and put potentially to voters if we, in fact, do go for an election, as we hear the rumors for this summer. We'll have to wait and see. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.